The faintest suggestion of gray had begun to seep into the deep, velvety black of the jungle canopy, a slow, almost imperceptible dilution of the night. Down below, nestled in the familiar crook of a thick, moss-covered branch, a small bird stirred. It wasn't a conscious decision, not really, more of an ancient, instinctual response to the subtle shift in the world around it. The air, which had been cool and still, now carried a faint, almost unnoticeable current, a whisper of the coming day. The bird, a creature of soft, unremarkable brown feathers, shifted its weight from one tiny foot to the other, its body a warm, feathered sphere tucked tightly against the rough bark of the ironwood tree. Its eyes, still closed behind delicate, paper-thin lids, registered the change in light as a dull, muted orange. There was no rush, no sense of urgency. The jungle floor was still a place of deep shadows and sleeping things, and the canopy above was just a latticework of silhouettes against a sky that was slowly, reluctantly, waking up. A single, long, drawn-out call from some distant creature echoed through the trees, a low, resonant sound that was as much a part of the morning as the dew itself. The brown bird didn't react. It had heard that call every morning for as long as it could remember. It was just another thread in the rich, unchanging tapestry of jungle sounds. The bird's own small heart beat a steady, quiet rhythm against its ribs, a tiny, persistent drum in the vast silence. It stretched one wing, then the other, a slow, deliberate unfurling of feathers that had been tucked away for warmth throughout the night. The movement was small, almost lost against the immense scale of the tree, but for the bird, it was a significant act, the first real movement of a new day. It ruffled its feathers, a quick, rustling shake that dislodged a tiny particle of sleep dust, then settled back into a comfortable stillness, waiting. There was nothing to do but wait for the light to grow, for the world to warm, for the jungle to begin its slow, predictable rhythm. The gray in the sky softened to a pale, milky white, and the outlines of the leaves above became sharper, more defined. The bird finally opened its eyes. The world it saw was the same world it had seen yesterday, and the day before that. The thick, gnarled branch of its chosen tree stretched out before it, a familiar highway of bark and moss. Beyond that, the leaves of a neighboring tree formed a dense, green curtain, dappled with the first weak rays of sunlight. The bird blinked slowly, its vision adjusting to the growing light. A tiny beetle, its shell a glistening emerald, crawled slowly along the branch, its antennae twitching, oblivious to the small feathered creature watching it. The bird considered the beetle for a moment, a flicker of instinct, of hunger, but it was a fleeting thought. The morning was still too new, too quiet for the effort of a hunt. The beetle crawled on, disappearing into a crevice in the bark, and the bird let it go without a second thought. Its first real task of the day was preening. It was a meticulous, unhurried process, a ritual that had been passed down through countless generations. Starting with the feathers on its chest, the bird used its small, deft beak to comb through each one, removing any specks of dirt, realigning any that were out of place. It was a comforting, repetitive motion, the gentle tug of the beak on the feathers, a familiar sensation. It worked its way methodically along its body, twisting its neck at an almost impossible angle to reach the feathers on its back and under its wings. Each feather was given its due attention, smoothed and oiled with a secretion from a gland at the base of its tail. The process was slow, deliberate, a quiet act of self-care in the stillness of the morning. The world could wait. This was important. By the time the bird was satisfied with its appearance, the sun had climbed higher, and the jungle was alive with a gentle, humming energy. The air was warmer now, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, the sweet fragrance of night-blooming flowers now fading, replaced by the green, vibrant smell of the day. The symphony of the jungle had begun in earnest, a complex and layered composition of chirps, clicks, buzzes, and rustles. The brown bird added its own small voice to the chorus, a simple two-note call that was neither particularly beautiful nor complex. It was just its call, a quiet announcement of its presence, a small "I am here" in the vastness of the jungle. It repeated the call a few times, listening to the echoes as they were absorbed by the dense foliage, then fell silent again, content to just listen. Hunger, a familiar, gentle ache, finally began to stir in its belly. It was time to find breakfast. The bird hopped from its sleeping branch onto a thinner, more flexible one, its tiny claws gripping the wood with practiced ease. It surveyed the scene below, its head cocked to one side, its sharp eyes scanning the forest floor. There was no specific plan, no destination in mind. The search for food was a meandering, opportunistic affair, a slow exploration of its small, familiar territory. It flew from its perch with a soft flutter of wings, a short, downward glide that carried it to the lower branches of a sprawling fig tree. The figs were not yet ripe, their green, hard skins offering little in the way of sustenance, but the tree was a known good spot for insects. It began its search, hopping along the branches, peering under leaves, probing into the crevices of the bark with its beak. The work was slow, methodical, a game of patience and observation. A fat green caterpillar, clinging to the underside of a leaf, became its first meal. The bird plucked it with a quick, decisive movement, then beat it against the branch a few times before swallowing it whole. The small morsel was satisfying, a small victory in the ongoing quest for survival. It continued its search, finding a small spider spinning a web in the crook of a branch, a couple of juicy ants marching in a line up the trunk. The food was not plentiful, but it was enough. The bird was not greedy. It took what it needed, what the jungle offered, and was content. The sun climbed higher, its rays now filtering through the canopy in bright, shifting patches of light on the forest floor. The air grew heavy, humid. The brown bird, its hunger sated for the moment, found a comfortable perch in the shade of a large, waxy leaf. It was time for a rest, a period of quiet observation. The jungle was a theater of constant, subtle activity, and the bird was a silent spectator. A troop of monkeys crashed through the upper canopy, their loud, boisterous calls and the shaking of branches marking their passage. The brown bird watched them go, unperturbed. They were a part of the jungle's daily drama, a noisy, chaotic element in the otherwise peaceful scene. A brightly colored butterfly, its wings a dazzling mosaic of blue and black, flitted past, its flight erratic and joyful. A long green snake, a creature of silent, fluid grace, slithered down the trunk of a nearby tree, its forked tongue tasting the air. The bird watched it all with a calm, detached curiosity. These creatures were its neighbors, the other inhabitants of its world, but their lives and its own rarely intersected in any meaningful way. They each had their own rhythms, their own routines, their own small, daily struggles and triumphs. The jungle was large enough for them all. The bird felt a sense of belonging, a quiet contentment in its small place in this vast, interconnected web of life. It didn't need to be the biggest or the fastest or the most beautiful. It just needed to be, and that was enough. As the day reached its peak, a deep, lazy quiet settled over the jungle. The heat was intense, a thick, palpable presence that seemed to slow everything down. Most creatures sought shelter, a shady spot to wait out the hottest part of the day. The brown bird did the same. It found a cool, sheltered spot in the dense foliage of a fern, its feathers fluffed out to allow the air to circulate. It dozed, its eyes half closed, its body still and relaxed. The jungle hummed with the incessant, monotonous drone of cicadas, a sound that was so constant it almost became a form of silence. The world seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for the heat to pass. The bird's dreams, if it dreamt at all, were simple, fragmented things, a jumble of sensations and images from its waking life. The taste of a ripe berry, the feeling of the sun on its feathers, the sound of the wind rustling through the leaves. There were no grand adventures, no epic journeys, just the simple sensory details of its small, predictable world. It was a peaceful, untroubled sleep, a deep, restorative rest in the heart of the sweltering day. The first sign of the afternoon's turning point was a subtle shift in the quality of the light. The harsh, white glare of midday softened to a warmer, more golden hue. The shadows, which had been short and sharp, began to lengthen, stretching out like long, dark fingers across the forest floor. The air, though still warm, lost some of its oppressive heaviness. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, a welcome caress after the stillness of the afternoon. The brown bird woke up, shaking off the last vestiges of sleep. It was time to become active again. A gentle thirst had developed during its long nap. The bird knew where to find water. A small, clear stream, fed by an underground spring, trickled through a nearby hollow. It was a quiet, secluded spot, surrounded by lush, green ferns and moss-covered stones. The bird flew down, landing on a smooth gray rock at the water's edge. It dipped its beak into the cool, clear water, taking small, quick sips. The water was refreshing, a pure, clean taste that washed away the dust and heat of the day. It drank its fill, then bathed, splashing in the shallow water, sending tiny, sparkling droplets into the air. The water cleaned its feathers, revitalized its body. It emerged from its bath feeling refreshed, renewed, ready for the remainder of the day. The late afternoon was often the most active time in the jungle, a second burst of energy before the coming of night. The brown bird felt it too, a renewed sense of purpose. There was still time to find more food, to explore its small territory, to simply enjoy the beauty of the fading day. It flew up into the trees again, its wings feeling strong and light after its rest and bath. It found a patch of ripe, red berries hanging from a bush, their sweet, juicy pulp a welcome treat after the insects of the morning. It ate them slowly, savoring the burst of flavor. It was a simple pleasure, but a profound one. As the sun began its descent towards the horizon, the jungle was bathed in a warm, golden light. The air became cooler, fresher. The sounds of the jungle began to change, the daytime chorus slowly giving way to the sounds of the evening. The brown bird found a high branch with a clear view of the western sky. It watched as the sun, a great, fiery orb, sank below the treetops, painting the clouds in spectacular shades of orange, pink, and purple. It was a sight of breathtaking beauty, a daily spectacle that never failed to fill the small bird with a sense of wonder. It didn't understand the science behind it, the physics of light and atmosphere. It just knew that it was beautiful, and that was enough. The twilight was a magical time in the jungle, a brief liminal period between day and night. The air was soft, still, and filled with the chirping of crickets and the croaking of frogs. The first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, tiny glittering diamonds scattered across a canvas of deep royal blue. The brown bird felt a sense of peace, a quiet contentment as the day drew to a close. It had been a good day, a day like any other. It had found food and water, it had rested, it had survived. There was nothing more it could ask for. It was time to find its sleeping perch, the same familiar crook in the thick, moss-covered branch of the ironwood tree. It flew to it, landing with a soft, gentle flutter. The spot was perfect, sheltered from the wind and hidden from the eyes of nocturnal predators. The bird fluffed out its feathers, creating a warm, insulating layer against the cool night air. It tucked its head under its wing, a position of ultimate comfort and security. The jungle was now a world of shadows and secrets, a place of mystery and danger for some. But for the brown bird, it was just home. The sounds of the night were different from the sounds of the day, a new symphony of hoots, calls, and rustles. But they were just as familiar, just as comforting. The bird listened to them for a while, the gentle, rhythmic pulse of the jungle at night, then slowly, peacefully drifted off to sleep. Its small body was still, its breathing slow and steady. It was just a small brown bird in a vast, quiet jungle, living a simple, boring, beautiful life. And as the moon cast its silvery light through the leaves, and the jungle whispered its ancient lullabies, the small bird slept on, dreaming its small, simple dreams, ready for another day, another morning, another slow, predictable, and utterly perfect routine. The cycle would continue unbroken, a timeless rhythm of waking and sleeping, of searching and finding, of simply being in the heart of the wild, a testament to the profound beauty of a life lived in quiet harmony with the world. The deep, resonant call of the distant creature would once again herald the dawn, and the small brown bird would stir, ready to begin its day. A day that would be, in all its wonderful, boring detail, exactly the same as the one before. And in that sameness, in that predictability, it found not monotony, but a deep and abiding peace. The moon, a pale, translucent sliver, was beginning to fade in the pre-dawn sky, its weak light swallowed by the encroaching gray of another morning. Tucked into its familiar hollow on the ironwood branch, the small brown bird felt the world shift around it. This morning was different, subtly so. A thick, cool mist had settled over the jungle during the night, a soft, white blanket that muffled sound and clung to every surface in tiny, glistening droplets. The air was heavy with moisture, carrying the rich, loamy scent of the forest floor in a way that was more intense, more present than on a clear day. The birds stirred, not from the light, which was still faint and diffuse, but from the pervasive dampness that seemed to seep into its very feathers. It was a gentle, clinging chill, a reminder of the jungle's ever-present humidity. Its small body, a warm and living sphere against the cold bark, shifted, a subconscious movement to preserve its precious warmth. The usual morning sounds were muted, softened by the thick fog. The distant, resonant call that always marked the beginning of the day was still there, but it sounded farther away, its edges blurred as if coming from another world. The intricate symphony of the jungle was playing in a lower key this morning, a gentle, hushed version of its usual self. The bird kept its eyes closed for a while longer, simply listening, feeling the world awaken through this soft, white veil. It could feel the fine mist on its beak, could sense the weight of the water droplets accumulating on the leaves above. It was a morning for slowness, for quiet contemplation, even more so than usual. It finally stretched a wing, the movement a silent, deliberate act in the still air, and tiny, almost invisible beads of moisture were dislodged from its feathers, falling silently onto the moss below. It was a day that felt different, yet fundamentally, it was the same. The sun would rise, the mist would burn away, and the day would unfold in its predictable, comforting rhythm. When it finally opened its eyes, the world was a soft focus painting of greens and grays. The leaves of the neighboring trees were indistinct shapes, their edges bleeding into the white mist. The familiar branch it perched upon was slick with moisture, the moss a deeper, more vibrant green, each tiny frond holding a perfect jewel-like droplet of water. It was beautiful in a quiet, understated way. The world felt smaller, more intimate, enclosed in this soft, white cocoon. The bird began its preening ritual, but today it was a more practical affair. Its feathers were damp, and it worked meticulously to dry them, combing through each one with its beak, fluffing them out to allow the air to circulate. The process was longer, more involved than on a dry morning, but the bird was in no hurry. The jungle was still waking up, and there was plenty of time. As it worked, the sun began to assert itself. It wasn't a sudden burst of light, but a slow, gradual brightening of the mist from within. The fog began to glow, first a soft gray, then a pearly white, then a pale, ethereal gold. Beams of light, thick and tangible, began to pierce through the canopy, illuminating swirling motes of dust and moisture in the air. It was a magical, otherworldly sight, and the bird paused in its preening for a moment to watch, its small, dark eyes reflecting the silent, luminous spectacle. The jungle was transforming around it, the mist slowly, reluctantly, giving way to the growing warmth of the day. It was a silent, beautiful battle between light and shadow, warmth and cool, and the bird was a privileged, solitary witness. With its feathers finally dry and in order, the familiar pang of hunger made itself known. The bird launched itself from its branch, its wings beating a soft, muffled rhythm in the damp air. Flying through the mist was a different experience. The world was a series of fleeting impressions, a succession of shapes emerging from and disappearing back into the white. It stayed in the lower canopy, where the visibility was better, its sharp eyes scanning for any sign of movement. It landed on a fallen log, its surface soft and spongy with decay. The log was a miniature world of its own, a thriving ecosystem of fungi and insects. The bird found a cluster of tiny, pale mushrooms growing in a crevice, their delicate caps still glistening with morning dew. It pecked at one, its taste earthy and unfamiliar, but not unpleasant. It was a small, novel addition to its usual diet, a small surprise in the predictable routine of its day. It continued its search along the log, finding a small, slow-moving slug making its way across the damp wood. It was an easy meal, a soft, protein-rich morsel that was quickly dispatched. The mist was beginning to thin now, breaking up into wisps and tendrils that drifted lazily through the trees. The sun was warmer, the air lighter. The sounds of the jungle were becoming clearer, more distinct. The day was finding its voice. The bird, its initial hunger satisfied, flew up to a higher branch, a familiar vantage point in a large, leafy tree. It was time to rest, to observe, to simply be. As it settled onto its perch, a slow, deliberate movement in the branches above caught its eye. It looked up, its head tilted, and saw a creature it had seen before, but only rarely. A sloth, its fur a mottled green with algae, was hanging upside down from a thick branch, moving with an almost imperceptible slowness. It reached out a long, curved claw, its movement so leisurely it was almost hypnotic, and hooked it onto another branch. It then, with the same painstaking deliberation, moved its other limbs, its body inching its way along the branch. The brown bird watched, fascinated. The sloth was the very embodiment of the jungle's slow, unhurried pace. It was a creature that existed in a different temporal reality, a world where there was no need for speed, no cause for alarm. The bird watched the sloth for a long time, its own small, quick movements a stark contrast to the sloth's languid grace. The sloth, seemingly unaware of its small observer, continued its slow, methodical journey through the canopy, a quiet, unassuming master of its own unhurried world. The sun was high in the sky now, the last remnants of the morning mist long gone. The heat of midday began to build, a familiar, oppressive weight. The bird, feeling the familiar lethargy of the afternoon, sought out its usual shady spot, a cool, dark place in the heart of a dense thicket of ferns. It fluffed out its feathers, settled its body into a comfortable position, and prepared to doze. The air was thick with the droning of insects, a monotonous, hypnotic sound that was the perfect lullaby for a hot afternoon. But today, the afternoon had a surprise in store. It started with a subtle darkening of the sky, a shift from bright, clear blue to a hazy, bruised gray. A low, distant rumble, a sound that was more felt than heard, vibrated through the air. The brown bird opened its eyes, its instincts telling it that something was changing. The wind began to pick up, rustling the leaves with a new urgency. The air grew cooler, fresher. And then the first drops of rain began to fall. They were large, heavy drops, splattering onto the broad leaves of the canopy with a sound like a drumbeat. The rain came quickly, a sudden, intense downpour that washed the world clean. The bird, safe and dry in its leafy shelter, watched as the jungle drank in the life-giving water. The sound of the rain was all-encompassing, a roaring, percussive symphony that drowned out all other sounds. It was a powerful, cleansing force, a dramatic, yet not unwelcome, interruption to the day's routine. The rain shower was intense but brief. As quickly as it had started, it began to subside, the heavy downpour softening to a gentle patter, then to a mere whisper, and then silence. The sun broke through the clouds, its light refracted through the millions of water droplets that clung to every surface, creating a world of glittering, diamond-like brilliance. The air was fresh, clean, and filled with the rich, intoxicating scent of wet earth. The jungle seemed to sigh in contentment, its thirst quenched, its leaves washed clean, its colors more vibrant and alive than before. The brown bird emerged from its shelter, shaking the few stray droplets from its feathers. The world felt new, reborn. It flew down to the stream, which was now running a little higher, a little faster, its water a swirling, energetic current. The rocks were dark and slick with rain, the ferns along the bank a deep, glossy green. The bird drank from a small, still pool at the edge of the stream, the water tasting of rain and earth. It bathed again, a quick, invigorating splash in the cool, rain-fed water. It felt energized, revitalized by the sudden storm. The late afternoon was a time of renewed activity, and the bird felt a surge of purpose. The rain had brought out new opportunities for food. The bird found a large, brightly colored beetle that had been washed onto a leaf, its legs flailing in the air. It was an easy, substantial meal. It found a cluster of small, tender shoots that had been coaxed from the ground by the sudden downpour, their taste fresh and green. The jungle was always providing, always offering up its small, simple gifts to those who knew where to look. The bird was a master of looking, of finding, of accepting what the day had to offer, whether it was a dry, sunny morning or a wet, stormy afternoon. It was all part of the same beautiful, unpredictable, yet fundamentally constant cycle of life. As the sun began its slow descent, the post-rain sky was a masterpiece of soft, muted colors. The clouds, now broken and scattered, were painted in delicate shades of lavender and rose, their edges tinged with a soft, buttery yellow. It wasn't the fiery, dramatic sunset of a clear day, but it had its own quiet, gentle beauty. The brown bird watched from a high branch, its small heart filled with a familiar sense of peace and awe. The world was a place of endless, simple wonders, and it was a privilege to be a small, quiet part of it all. The twilight that followed was filled with the sound of frogs, their loud, joyous chorus a celebration of the rain. The air was cool and fresh, the stars sharp and bright in the newly washed sky. The brown bird, its day's work done, its belly full, its body clean and refreshed, felt a deep, bone-deep sense of contentment. It flew back to its ironwood tree, its familiar sleeping perch a welcome sight. It settled into its accustomed spot, the moss on the branch now soft and damp against its body. It tucked its head under its wing, the familiar, comforting gesture that signaled the end of another day. The jungle whispered its nightly lullabies around it, the sounds of the frogs, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. It was a symphony of life, a constant, reassuring reminder that it was not alone. The small brown bird, a creature of habit and routine, had navigated a day of subtle surprises, of mist and rain, of a slow-moving sloth in a vibrant, post-storm world. And yet, in the end, it was just another day, another cycle of waking and sleeping, of living and being. It was a boring, uneventful, and utterly perfect life. And as the moon, now a little fuller, a little brighter, cast its silver light over the sleeping jungle, the small bird slept on, its dreams filled with the taste of rain-washed berries and the sight of a world made new, ready to greet another dawn, another day of quiet, simple, beautiful existence. The profound peace of its life was not in the absence of events, but in the acceptance of them, in the gentle, unwavering rhythm of its own small, significant being, a tiny, beating heart in the vast, breathing body of the jungle. The first hint of the new day arrived not as light, but as sound and motion. A low, persistent sigh was breathing through the jungle's upper canopy, a sound that was ancient and immense, the voice of the wind itself. Down in its sheltered crook on the ironwood branch, the small brown bird felt this change as a gentle, rhythmic swaying. The great tree, a bastion of stability, was moving, rocking ever so slightly in the unseen currents of the air. It was a cradle-like motion, deep and reassuring, the slow dance of a giant. The bird stirred within its feathered warmth, its internal clock registering the familiar cues of dawn. But this morning they were accompanied by this new, pervasive sensation of movement. The air that filtered through the leaves was different too. It was fresher, drier, and carried with it the sense of the deeper jungle, distant blossoms and damp earth, all swirled together and delivered on the breeze. It kept its eyes closed, simply experiencing the world through these other senses for a time. It could hear the rustle of a million leaves, a sound like a great, slow river flowing through the sky. It could feel the press of the wind against the feathers on its back, a gentle but firm pressure. This was a day of air, a day of movement. The familiar morning call of the distant creature arrived on the wind, its notes seeming to travel faster, arriving clearer than on the still, misty morning before. The jungle was alive with a different kind of energy, not the sudden burst of a storm, but a continuous flowing vitality. The bird stretched its wings, one after the other, the small movements a quiet counterpoint to the grand, sweeping motion of the world around it. It felt safe, anchored to its branch, a still point in a rustling, swaying world. When it finally opened its eyes, the scene was one of constant, gentle flux. The leaves on the neighboring trees were never still, dancing and trembling, turning over to show their paler undersides in the moving air. The light of the rising sun was fractured and dappled, not in the still patches of a calm day, but in a constantly shifting, flickering pattern that played across the forest floor. The world seemed more alive, more dynamic. The bird began its preening, a familiar, grounding ritual in the midst of this gentle chaos. It had to shift its position slightly, turning its back to the prevailing breeze, tucking itself deeper into the shelter of the main trunk. The wind seemed to help its work, ruffling its feathers, allowing it to comb through them with greater ease, the air itself a partner in its morning toilet. The task was completed with the same unhurried, meticulous care as always. A small act of personal order in a world of beautiful, flowing disorder. Its hunger began to stir, a familiar, reliable ache. The bird considered its first flight of the day. Flying in the wind required a different set of skills, a more intuitive understanding of the air's currents. It launched itself from the branch, and for a moment the wind caught it, lifting it higher than it intended. It adjusted with a subtle tilt of its wings, a slight shift of its tail feathers, finding the rhythm of the air, learning to use its power rather than fight against it. It was exhilarating in a quiet, understated way. It glided on a current, a small brown surfer on an invisible wave, covering more ground with less effort than on a still day. The jungle unfolded below it, a rolling green ocean of leaves. Finding food, however, proved to be a slightly greater challenge. The insects it usually found clinging to the undersides of leaves were harder to spot, their small forms obscured by the constant movement. The leaves themselves were skittish, dancing away just as the bird tried to land on them. After a few fruitless attempts, it changed its strategy. The wind made the canopy a difficult place to hunt, so it would try the forest floor. It glided down, landing softly on a patch of moss near the base of a giant ceiba tree. Down here, the wind was much calmer, its power buffered by the dense undergrowth. The air was still and quiet, the sounds of the rustling canopy a distant, overhead roar. It was a different world, a place of shadows and stillness. It began to hop across the leaf litter, its sharp eyes scanning the ground. The wind had been at work here too, clearing away the loose leaves in some places, piling them up in others. It was in one of these cleared patches that the bird saw it, a long, winding, unbroken line of ants. They were leaf-cutter ants, each one carrying a large, green fragment of a leaf, held aloft like a sail. The procession was endless, emerging from the deep shadows of the forest in one direction and disappearing into a hole in the ground in the other. The bird watched, utterly captivated by the sight. The ants were a marvel of single-minded collective purpose. Each one knew its task, its place in the line. There was no confusion, no hesitation. It was a silent, relentless army, working for the good of a whole it could not possibly comprehend. The bird hopped closer, its head cocked. It had no interest in eating the ants. They were not its preferred food. It was simply observing, a curious spectator to this incredible display of industry. It watched for a very long time, the slow, steady movement of the ant river a hypnotic, calming sight. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and still the ants marched on, and still the bird watched, a small, still creature lost in contemplation of the immense, quiet labor of others. Eventually, its own needs reasserted themselves. It left the ants to their endless task and continued its own search. The wind had been helpful in other ways. It had knocked loose a piece of bark from a rotting log, exposing a colony of fat white grubs beneath. It was a feast, a rare and welcome bounty. The bird ate its fill, the soft, protein-rich bodies a satisfying meal. It felt a quiet gratitude for the wind, for its unpredictable, yet often generous nature. It had made one task harder, but another much easier. The jungle always provided, always found a way to balance itself. With its belly full, the bird flew up to a mid-level perch, choosing a thick, sturdy vine that hung down from the canopy. The vine swayed gently in the breeze, a slow, rhythmic motion that the bird found soothing. From this new vantage point, it resumed its role as the silent observer. The world was still in motion, the leaves still dancing, the light still flickering. It was on the trunk of a nearby tree that it saw something new, or rather, something it almost didn't see at all. A lizard, its skin a perfect, mottled pattern of green and brown, was pressed flat against the bark, its body so perfectly camouflaged it was almost invisible. The bird had only spotted it because of the faintest of movements, the tiny, pulsing beat of its throat. The bird watched the lizard, and the lizard, in its own motionless way, seemed to watch the world. They were two still points in the moving jungle, two creatures of patience and observation. A large blue butterfly landed on a leaf near the lizard's head, its wings gently fanning the air. The lizard didn't move. It was waiting, perhaps for a smaller, less conspicuous insect to come within reach of its long, sticky tongue. The butterfly, its business done, flew away, and still the lizard remained, a small, patient sculpture of life. The bird felt a sense of kinship with the lizard, a shared understanding of the value of stillness, of the power of simply watching and waiting. The midday heat arrived, but today it was tempered by the persistent breeze. The oppressive, heavy stillness of a calm day was replaced by a more pleasant, breathable warmth. The wind acted as a natural fan, a constant, cooling caress. The bird found its usual shady spot, but today it didn't feel the same deep, sleepy lethargy. The constant rustling of the leaves, the gentle swaying of the branches, kept it in a state of light, pleasant awareness. It rested its body, but its mind remained gently active, listening to the symphony of the wind, feeling the movement of the world. Its nap was a different kind of rest, not a deep, unconscious slumber, but a quiet, conscious repose, a meditation on the sounds and feelings of a windy day. In the late afternoon, its thirst drew it to the stream. The surface of the water, usually a smooth, clear mirror, was today a network of constantly shifting ripples, the wind chasing itself across the surface. The bird drank, its beak dipping into the cool, moving water. As it was about to fly off, it noticed something new on the bank. A large, yellow fruit with a soft, fragrant pulp had been knocked from a high branch by the wind, landing half in and half out of the water. It was a type of fruit the bird had only tasted a few times before, a rare and delicious treat. It hopped over, pecking at the soft, sweet flesh. The taste was a burst of pure, sugary energy, a perfect afternoon snack. Again, the wind had provided. The sun began to set, and the windy day produced a spectacular, dynamic sunset. The clouds, which had been pushed across the sky all day, were now stretched into long, thin, feathery streaks. As the sun sank below the horizon, it set these clouds ablaze, painting them in fiery shades of orange, crimson, and gold. The colors were not static, but seemed to flow and shift, the streaks of cloud moving and changing shape in the last light of the day. It was a wild, beautiful and fleeting spectacle, a perfect end to a day of motion and change. The flight back to its roost was easy, the bird riding the currents of the evening air like a master navigator. It landed on its familiar branch in the ironwood tree, the great tree feeling more solid, more reassuring than ever in the moving world. The sound of the wind sighing through the leaves of the giant tree was a deep, powerful lullaby, a sound of immense, ancient peace. The bird settled into its crook, fluffing out its feathers, making itself a warm, secure ball against the wood. It tucked its head under its wing, feeling the gentle, rhythmic swaying of the branch, a slow, steady rocking that was deeply comforting. It felt held, protected, a small, precious life in the arms of a great living thing. The sounds of the night were carried on the wind, the hoots and calls seeming to come from all directions at once. But the dominant sound was the wind itself, a constant, soothing whoosh that promised a deep and peaceful sleep. The bird, rocked gently by the motion of the tree, listening to the lullaby of the wind, closed its eyes and drifted off. It had been a day of movement, of change, of gentle challenges and unexpected gifts. It had been a day unlike the still, misty day before it, and unlike the clear, hot day before that. And yet, it had been a day of profound, unwavering routine. It had woken, it had preened, it had eaten, it had rested, it had survived. The details changed, but the essence remained the same. It was a boring, simple, beautiful life. A life of endless variation within a framework of perfect, unchanging consistency. And as the wind whispered its secrets to the sleeping jungle, the small brown bird, secure in its swaying cradle, slept on, dreaming its quiet, simple